Director of Advocacy and Grant Programs for the Foundation. I am Mika Obayashi, and I will be the MC today. And the first person I would like to introduce you to is Mr. Thomas Cobadiel, who is the Executive Board Chair. And in addition, we have Ida Tetsunari, who is going to be sitting next to Mr. Cobadiel in just a few moments. He's Executive Director. And we also have Eric Martinot, Mr. Eric Martinot, who is acting as advisor. And also, we also have the Emmy Mizuno, Secretary General and Deputy Director for Technology Business Development. So we'd like to begin by having Mr. Cobadiel talk a little bit about the foundation and also talk a little bit about the three-day seminar that we had for this foundation.
The foundation has a very simple goal. The foundation has the goal to increase the utilization of renewable energy in Japan in order to make more accidents of the kind we saw in Fukushima unnecessary, and also give the opportunity to reduce the use of imported fossil fuels, which is both a cost to Japan and an environmental threat globally. The meeting we have had over the last few days has been a meeting of international and Japanese experts in this field. It's a remarkably encouraging observation that Japan has fantastic potentials to successfully develop renewable energy quickly. First of all, there is a lot of industry in Japan that has the scientific, technological, and industrial capacity to supply the technologies required. And increasing the dynamics in the energy sector in Japan will create new profitable markets for these companies. Unlike European countries, the counter-arguments against renewables that have always come up in countries trying to increase the use of renewables can be more easily handled in Japan, because you can refer to examples elsewhere where, for example, the increased use of wind power to a significant share of the electricity production has been already achieved, and it has been proven that it is very possible. From the evidence provided this week, we also see that Japan is in a situation where electricity supply is very expensive. Household customers, as well as electricity-depending industries, will benefit from an open, fair, competitive electricity market where distribution is unbundled, separated from the production and sale of electricity, and where the production and sale of electricity is a competitive market where the new technologies such as wind, biomass and solar can compete with the old existing power plants. So from what we've heard this week, this will be a change that will have many winners, and fundamentally the modernization and improvement of Japanese energy supply, reducing the risks for events like the Fukushima event, is something that Mr. Son-san, as well as many others, have pointed out is the important driving force for their engagement in renewable energy and in the Japan Renewable Energy Foundation. And the participation and the engagement of the very many knowledgeable Japanese and international participants at this conference has been very encouraging, and I personally look forward to work with this foundation in the coming years and hope that we will be successful in improving the competitiveness and living conditions in Japan. Thank you. Tetsu, maybe you should go on and say something on the organization and structure of the foundation and the activities.
Yes.
In regard to JREF, I am serving as executive director. I am Tetsunari Ida. In regard to the foundation and what kind of structure it has and what kind of things we have on our agenda, I would like to give you a very quick explanation or summary. I'm not going to go into too much detail, perhaps, but from Monday of this week, I think you have a pamphlet of the activities we've been engaged upon over the past 3 days. But I might summarize our activities as being: one, we're going to focus on producing innovative policies to promote the use of renewable energies. We want to help create policies, viable policies that will actually contribute to a better society. And also, in regard to, so we don't have Mr. Murasawa, who is in charge of the Technical Innovation Division, but in the plenary session, he spoke about the possibilities that this is an area in which businesses are very, very possible to be realized, and also monies can be earned in this field. In other words, there is a great deal of interest from the financial point of view, and if there is more interest from the financial sector, there will be even further growth in this field. And Ms. Kobayashi, is in charge of another division, and Eric-san will probably talk a little bit about this area. But the fact that we were able to have about 100 experts from all over the world, not necessarily experts, but also people from different organizations that try to promote renewable energies, putting together all of these people in a kind of global network and bringing in local governments, trying to help create better directives and ordinances and laws, creating better, stronger network with corporations. And also we'll talk a little bit about subsidies and grants for different areas, regions. The idea of being able to have initiatives that will be able to realize visions that will help create better societies. These are the kinds of grants and subsidies that we are considering along these lines. So these are the kinds of policies, creating businesses that we are involved in, and the advocacy kind of work that we're doing. So Innovation Network. This time we had about 30 experts from abroad, and we had many experts from Japan as well. And we had actually other people who were nominated to participate but who could not come to the symposium this time. But the idea of hit and away, what we mean by that is that until now, people have just simply been able to go abroad to study what's happening in other countries, and they come back and write a report, most of which were full of false information. That kind of activity really has not been very productive in the past. Even in its most positive forms, we had foreign experts come to Japan, and they would be presented in a very celebrity kind of way. They would give the keynote speech and get a lot of media attention, but they really would not have in-depth discussions with their counterparts in Japan. So when we consider the fact that there are so many tremendous creative and interesting initiatives occurring throughout the world, the fact that we are out of this network in Japan, that we have not been connected, we wanted to change this. and we wanted to become a new hub in this international network. It's probably the first time that a foundation of this nature has been created in Japan. So this innovation network, I think maybe Eric-san can talk a little bit more about this in detail.
Thank you, and hello, ladies and gentlemen. If you look at the landscape of global institutions working on renewable energy, we have the International Energy Agency, we have other organizations like REN 21, and IRENA now created the International Renewable Energy Agency. I would say that it's still fragmented, and there's not a sort of coherent international voice or global leadership for renewable energy at a global level, and we still need that. And we see it in Europe at a European level very clearly, European level leadership for renewable energy, and we see it in other regions and countries and so on, but we're talking about global leadership now. And to me, this is one of the promises of this new foundation. So obviously, there's a lot of work to be done here in Japan, and the foundation will be facilitating that, and I think that's extremely important for Japan. But I think it's also important globally, that this will be a force globally to help consolidate leadership for renewable energy, simply by existing, for one thing. The fact that Japan is emerging as a global leader again in renewable energy through investments by people like Mr. Son and this foundation, I think will affect people's perceptions and thinking about renewable energy globally, not just here in Japan. Ida-san mentioned the Innovation Network. This is planned to be 100 people from around the world, experts in many different fields, from business, from industry, from academia, from community groups, from the finance community, many different perspectives on renewables. And what we can do with this innovation network, this group of 100 people, is really to share and learn experience, innovation, to share and learn about innovation for renewable energy. And I'm not talking about technical innovation, technology innovation. I'm really talking about business innovation, social innovation, finance innovation, new types of social models, new types of business models. I think that's really the promise of this innovation network, is to bring this together, to share and learn from it. Of course, the network can advise the foundation in its programs and in its results and so on. Of course, the innovation network can serve as a bridge between work in Asia on renewable energy and work in other parts of the world, Europe, US, developing countries, Africa, Latin America, and so on. So I think that's important. We could put together a collective set of visions about the future and so on. But I think ultimately what we're talking about is facilitating a global dialogue, global leadership for renewable energy, in some way contributing to that. And I hope to see that through the foundation.
ありがとうございます。イノベーションという言葉いっぱい出てきましたけど、ここイノベーション。
So we have had the term innovation repeated a number of times. This hall is called the Innovation Halls. But now I'd like to ask Ms. Emi Mizuno, who is the Secretary General and Deputy Director for Technology Business Development, to talk to us. I'm serving as the Secretary General. My name is Mizuno Emi, and I'm also Deputy Director for this Technology Business Development as well. Technology Business Model Development Group is involved in what Japan has been doing in the past concerning the renewable energies. We have had various business know-how and technology already available, and we are aware of where we stand. However, when we look at the marketing situation, we think that commercialization and marketing has not been going as well as we would have wanted. So we would like to try to look both inside of Japan and outside of Japan to look into what possibilities exists within and without Japan. And we want to look into the business know-how available around the world and to try to see whether matchmaking is possible, and then to evolve new business models in this process, if possible. And in the process, we like to try to think of the emphasis that Team Japan
can put forward in this process. So we would be very much interested in conducting matchmaking, but then at the same time we'd like to think about new financing methods and new financing structures. And one of the important ways of doing this is to look into, as this organization, not to make profit, but to try to stay neutral and to try to see to it that the players involved here in Japan will be able to benefit from what we are doing, to try to help them gain the needed competitiveness through new business models, etc. We want to try to strengthen the various players here in Japan, and we would like to try to support their activities in that regard. So that's a briefing about what we are doing in our development division and this organization. I'd like to mention about advocacy and grant program. And advocacy is not a term that is familiar to the Japanese. And I have been involved in citizens' movements for about 10 years, and I've also been working in government organizations, etc. And I have gained experience through lobbying activities. This is my function as a participant in these kind of movements, and therefore we like to try to do adequate input giving to the players who will be involved in this process. And there was this concern about innovation network, as Eric has raised, and we'd like to try to cooperate in his efforts as well. And the last point, as Mr. Ida mentioned, was to try to enter into the grant programs, not for Japanese operators, but also from people around the world, or rather in the Asian region as the main. Now, if you have any questions, we'd like to try to entertain those questions if you have any. And so we would like you to raise your hand and to try to state your name and affiliation, and also state who you would like to address this question that you will be addressing. Who would like to start off? I'm Wakasugi of Nihon Keizai Shimbun. I would like to ask about the photovoltaic power generation and solar power generation, and I'd like to think about concerns in Oita, Yamagata, and various parts of Japan who are interested and who have participated in this effort here today. And I think the local governments are very much interested in trying to revitalize the local governments, and I'm very much interested in local government activities. And anyone wishing to address the question to Thomas? I'd like to ask Mr. Thomas to respond to this query that has been raised.
Local governments have proven to be very important actors in the dissemination of renewable energy in many European countries. The most important role has been in establishing the opportunity to use biomass residues from forestry and agriculture, turning these waste products into a resource for production of electricity and heat that can be distributed to heat houses in cities. Building that infrastructure requires the engagement of the municipalities, and I think this is one of the opportunities in the short term in Japan in areas that are being rebuilt after the earthquake and tsunami. But also investments in solar electricity is one where municipalities and public buildings have often played an important role. Public buildings often being large enough to build rather large solar PV installations. The municipalities and prefectures are also units where you can combine the resources and power of a community democratic organization with knowledge of the new local circumstances and local opportunities. national governments may have power, but they don't have the detailed knowledge of the local opportunities. But municipalities and prefectures to some extent do. And I expect that many important steps in the development in Japan will be taken by these levels of the political system.
その他よろしいでしょうか。
Further questions? Please. I'm Asahi Newspaper. I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Ida. Today, I know there were many discussions and debates, but in regard to the separation of the transmission and power generation capabilities of utilities, and in order to have more decentralized sources of energy, what do you think about these matters? And also, for the next 6 months or so, I think for the next 6 months, I think many important decisions will be made about the future of energy policy in Japan. What do you think about some of these issues? Thank you for your question. First of all, in regard to the vertical disintegration idea, there was a commitment expressed by Mr. Son on Monday. In regard to research, we want to focus our efforts on that area. Mr. Son was also involved in a dialogue session just a few moments ago, and he had a dialogue with his foreign counterparts. And Mr. Stefansson from an International Wind Power Association organization came and spoke. He spoke about the fact that wind power has great promise and is already a very important source of energy in other nations. And I've been talking about vertical disintegration for many years, and I know that it's a huge battlefield that we have facing us. But I think we have to not be too embroiled in this battle. We think, on the one hand, we have to really push the idea of increasing the abilities and the potentials of renewable energies, and on the other hand, we have to work on the idea of being able to use the new FIT law to its utmost capacity. In other words, there is now an obligation for power utilities to allow other forms of energy to be able to access the grid. And there are, of course, some caveats in regard to this. And so what kinds of rules actually will be developed in the future to define what the restrictions might be about which players may not be able to access the grid? These are the kinds of things that we are working on at present. So I think we're focused on these issues very much. In regard to vertical disintegration, of course, you can have many theoretical discussions. But when we talk about TEPCO, the Tokyo Electric Power Company, in what form is this organization or this entity going to exist in the future? How will it possibly shape? It might go bankrupt. It might possibly be nationalized. We don't know, because depending on what happens to TEPCO, we really cannot make a final decision on what the best kind of vertical disintegration might be. We've heard that from the 28th. There will be various discussions about energy policies. It's said that it's going to take about 10 years to come to a final decision about the future of this in Japan. And you also asked about the 6 months in the future. Sorry. In regard to policies for the next 6 months or so, for things that are going to be visible, I don't think there's going to be anything necessarily concrete that we can present as an award or as a document. But what we can do is that in regard to the FIT law, I think detailed rules are going to now be prepared by METI. And after that, it's going to be also within the METI. There's going to be another committee that is going to fix prices or decide prices. It's considered between January and March, actually specific prices, and these contract periods will probably be worked out. And, of course, we're going to be doing lobbying efforts, October, November, December, the next 3 months. I think it's going to be very important timing, an important period for us in terms of activities to make sure that we get good decisions coming out of that committee. They're going to be having many workshops. We're going to have lots of press releases. In other words, so all of the policy proposals that we are going to be making to this period are going to be quite numerous and quite frequent. And we're and then afterwards, we're going to have to change tactics once the committee starts deliberating in January, February, March. But one of the focal points for our foundation is, of course, we now, you can see that 9/11 just finished, and so now we started our symposium in 9/12. So the next big goal for us is maybe 3/11 next year. So that's one big focal point if we're putting together a kind of agenda or policy action plan for the next 6 months, working up to March 11. But of course, having said this, we're going to be doing lots of things in the meantime, in the interim as well.
Yes, of course you can add that too.
Had a comment, some context on the feed-in tariff policy. In case you weren't here on Monday, the number of countries or states or provinces in the world that have a feed-in tariff policy now is 87. So there are 87 countries or states or provinces around the world with a feed-in tariff policy enacted. And that's an increase from only 41 in 2005. So in the last 6 years, we've seen a doubling of the number of countries and states with feed-in tariffs around the world. And I think that attests to the effectiveness of this type of policy. We've seen it in Europe for many years, as has been discussed, but the number of countries that are enacting this policy keeps growing year by year. Even just the last 2 years, we had 71 in 2008, now up to 87 2 years later. Also, the statistics in terms of the question for the cities, we find over 200 cities around the world with some type of policy to support renewable energy, and there are about 10 or 15 common types of policies to support renewable energy at the city level. But Thomas mentioned many cities in Europe, but we can also see many cities in the U.S. and Latin America and Asia now with policy at the city level, over 200 major cities around the world with these types of policies, including many cities in Japan. And Japan cities are actually a major part of that picture. They're actually leading in that area.
I'd just like to mention one issue that will be important for the industrial success of Japan, and that is that the new rules and regulations for example, the conditions on connecting wind power plants to the national grid, or to the grid, is kept simple and not one introducing new barriers to wind power entering the electricity system. And there are some bad, but also many good examples in the world of how simple these conditions can be. I fear that the power companies in Japan who feel threatened by wind power competing with their old power plants will try to build new barriers. But for the economic efficiency and competitiveness, it's important to avoid unnecessarily difficult, complicated demands on the new entrance in the market.
ありがとうございます。その他ご質問ございますでしょうか。
Are there any further questions? Someone in the back?
すみません、日本経済新聞の木戸と申しますが。
My name is Kido of Nihon Keizai Shimbun, and I'd like to ask for a comment from the the executive director. So, as an expert in the renewable energy, you have this communication person, Mr. Sun, is very much involved. And so I would be very much interested in knowing how you will be organizing this foundation and how you are going to be positioning Mr. Sun. Is there a merit to having this kind of a communication person in this kind of an organization? And would be very much interested in the framework of this foundation.
I think the initiative of Mr. Son is driven by his sincere engagement in the tragic consequences of March 11, together with the experience of having been able to develop and reform the telecommunication industry. While I have heard very many Japanese colleagues this week saying that things cannot change in the Japanese energy system, Son-san belongs to those who know that established structures can be improved, thereby improving the welfare of the country. And of course, he also knows that being early in trying to improve things, you can also earn money. The role of the foundation is not to make money, but it is to bring to the actors of Japan the best possible knowledge and information about opportunities, facilitating for any ambitious entrepreneur, local citizens groups, politicians, or others who are interested in contributing to the development of renewables, to offer them the best possible information and advice that we can collect in Japan and throughout the world.
Thank you very much for this. Any other questions? This person over here, please. And then the person, I think close to that person is going to be the next questioner. I'm Miyake of Kyodo Tsushin. My question is directed to Mr. Ida. This is related to the previous question. You are going to be making policy statements and policy recommendations, and I'm sure that you are very much interested in having this implemented. How are you going to have this realized? And I think there should also be coordination between Asian supergrid people. And so I would be interested in knowing how you're going to be liaising with these people so that this kind of development is going to be spread around Asia. Yes, please. My name is Fujimura of Solvis, who is involved in PVs. And I would also like to ask Mr. Ida, you were talking about policy proposals, and you were thinking about connections of grids, etc. too. But I'm also interested in pricing as well, and I think that flexible attitude is going to be necessary for this too, where you're going to be setting these facilities on the ground or on the roof or elsewhere, and also for wind generation too. And you have to think about this, so there should be flexible pricing. And then there's also this purchasing of generated power, and so who is going to be having the ownership rights? And I would be very much interested in how the CO2 emission trading can be offset by the various proposals as you would be making. And so I would be interested in these points being addressed. The first question was to do the proposal, what is going to happen to the proposal, as well as the relationship with Asian supergrid, and also how are the supergrid and these renewable energy sources going to be made use of effectively. There was a mention about feed-in tariff, and which is related to the question that was posed by this other gentleman. And it's going to be important that basic and logical and rational type of papers must be presented. And so that would be serving as the basis of our activities. And so in doing so, the experts from around the world we have been able to gather for this event. will be playing a very important role. As Eric said, already 87 countries have introduced the mechanism, and successful countries, unsuccessful countries, and this bubble of Spain, etc. But there'll be examples of how you can succeed as a business, and so these will be the intelligence or information that we will be working on. And of course, on this basis, it's important that this kind of framework be propagated. And so it's going to be important that we address the decision makers of this country to try to realize our plans, political leadership, leaders of local government, leaders in the bureaucracy, etc. And we will be approaching networks created by these people independently and also collectively. And we will also be approaching the media who have gathered today, as well as other groups through which we will be able to communicate to the general public. We'd also like to have the understanding of the industries, and so from 2:30 today, we will be having this Renewable Energy Association people who will be working on this as a start. And there's also this Federation of Japanese Federation of Economic Organizations who can also be approached for this purpose. And so we will be liaising with all the ISAM possible organizations, and based on propping up ourselves on a very sound foundation, we would like to try to liaise with the available mechanisms, and we think that agenda setting in this process is going to be very important. With respect to pricing, it's going to be important to try to look into the environmental legislative framework, and so there is going to be a revision of the legislative framework 3 years hence, and so we will be working based on these kind of revisions, which will be taking place in 3 years at time. And we would like to try to see that a creative pathway can be made. With respect to Asia Supergrid, we want to look into the systematic framework and also support all various research activities. And then there's also some projects which will be industrialized, and Mr. Sun might come into this process, but we would like to try to see that we will be able to help in the unbundling process. And we want to look into the merits and demerits of what we will be able to do from our various perspectives. And we hope that there will be a number of briefings we will be able to conduct based on our work. There probably will be different types of hurdles we need to overcome, but this will be done through the business process. There will be areas which the foundation will be covering, and there will also be areas which business people will be involved in. So we'd like to try to see how we'll be able to organize this setup.
Also, there was a question about the green certificate as well. Well, I was actually referring to that when I was talking about the environmental concerns, not really, or the environmental value of some of these efforts. In other words, I was talking really about the fact that from the average person's point of view, or the average industries, the fact that until now, it has been the case that the electricity companies have been able to get into the wallets, so to speak, of the individual electricity users. However, it's in other words, this entire situation has been quite distorted, and I think this is something that we have to research. And based on our research, we want to be able to put together corrective policy proposals. The guarantee of origin is an important concept in this regard. In other words, making sure that it's going to be similar to the green electricity mechanism that we have. What it is that we want to make sure that whoever is actually responsible for emitting CO2 is actually bearing that burden. We want to make sure that there is no further distortion in the system. In the Japanese system at present, we have no kind of systematic approach to resolving this problem. So I think 3 years from now, when the current law is going to be reviewed, in regard to the FIT law, the idea of taking into account avoidance costs and being able to take into account the green value or environmental value, which takes into account how much CO2 has been reduced. These are the kinds of things that we need to be able to pursue more research in before the 3-year deadline to review the process. So that's what we have basically in mind.
I think we should remind ourselves of what has happened over the last 5-10 years, when subsidy schemes and carbon trading or carbon taxation was introduced in many parts of the world. What has happened since are two things. The price of oil has increased by a factor of 5. The price of coal has increased by approximately a factor of 3. And at least those who try to build new nuclear power plants have also experienced dramatic cost increases. At the same time, the cost of solar PV cells as well as wind power plants have decreased by about a factor 3, 4, 5. Dramatic decrease in the price of solar PVs only during the last 12 months. It is not necessary to have these special rules to make wind power and solar PVs or biomass fuel cogeneration feasible anymore. But of course, it will make it much more profitable if, in addition to the direct competitiveness, you also have a fair marketplace where environmental costs are included in the costs and pricing of conventional energy.
Thank you very much. Are there any other further questions, especially in regard to the activities of the foundation? If you have any questions in this regard, the person there.
Sarno from Le Figaro. What is the actual budget and how is it ventilated among your activities?
こちらどなたお答えになります？
Who would like to answer this, Ms. Mizuno?
ですね、今のところちょっとその情報に関しては申し上げること段階に。
In regard to this kind of information, we are not at present prepared to disclose this information. But if I may add a comment, Mr. Son, of course, we have already decided that 1 billion yen will be contributed by Mr. Son to our activities. But in regard to our organization, we are in the process of preparing our structure, and once we have been able to put together a structure to be able to take in those funds, we would like to be able to better plan our budget and distribute the monies accordingly.
その他ご質問ございます。
Are there any other questions? I'm Wakisaka from the Asahi newspaper. 2011 September, that's where we are today. I'd like to ask you what you think is important about this period that we are in right now, whether it's Ida-san or Eric-san or Thomas-san. In other words, many things have changed in recent years. We see, for example, that in regard to climate change, the concern or interest, global interest, it seems to have fallen in recent months. And also in regard to deregulation, in the 1990s, there was great focus on that, at least in Japan, but there isn't so much interest in that at present. So in Japan, in regard to this rapid change, do you expect rapid change for Japan? apologize for that. Mr. Ida must move to another venue. Or do you think the changes that will come to Japan will come very slowly? Are there any other questions, or can this be the last question? So, Mr. Wakisaka's question, Eric-san and Thomas-san, could you please give comments?
When it comes to climate change, the urgency of the issue has not decreased, but I would rather interpret the situation so that the global opponents to carbon emission restrictions have become more well organized and are now blocking global negotiations. When it comes to the change in Japan, I understand too little to know how fast it will be, but I do see the economic benefits and the environmental benefits and the safety benefits of rapid change. So I hope that change will be fast. But as a foreigner, clever enough to realize I don't understand very much, I will not make a projection.
I might characterize it this way in terms of where we are now. Is we're changing from the old era, which is an era of if we can have renewable energy, to a new era of how to do it. So that we're seeing now an acceptance that yes, we are going to do it, and the only question is how do we do it. And for example, Denmark has now, everybody in Denmark accepts that Denmark is going to be 100% renewable electricity by 2030. That's just a given. And now the question in everybody's mind, how do we get there? What do we have to do? How do we have to restructure investment in transmission and power and energy and so on to get there? But it's accepted that that's going to happen, 100% renewable electricity by 2030. And you see that more and more around the world. And I think part of the reason is because now renewable energy, as has been mentioned earlier in the conference, is the majority of investment in the power sector worldwide. There's more money being invested every year in renewable energy than being invested in all other forms of power generation together, coal, oil, gas, nuclear. And this has been the case for the last 3 years in the US and in Europe, and now on a global level this past year, 2010, is true on a global level, more investment in renewable energy than investment in conventional power generation. And I think that really represents the turning point, the point where people start to think not about if, but about how. And perhaps I might say that Japan is a little bit behind, still in the era of if, but we're hoping now to see also emerge into this new era of how.
ありがとうございます。本日は本当に
Thank you very much. Sorry to keep you waiting in beginning this session. I apologize, but I thank you very much for this large gathering that you have afforded us for this press meeting. Thank you very much.